Thank you very much, and I hope you're here for an incredible day. You are the dedicated, right? So I've been teaching 31 years. The last 4 I've been out of the classroom as a teacher on special assignment. It sounds so cool, right? So I'm a TOSA, and I get to go into all 5 of our elementary schools at my district and work with teachers there. So I've been out of school now for about 3 weeks. How about you? 2? 2 or 3? Okay, so you're with me. You know exactly what this means, right? I don't know. I'm still waking up before sunrise, right? Just a habit. Are you still going to the bathroom exactly at 10 o'clock? And sometimes I even wait in line, right? Even though there isn't one, because we're all used to that. What grade levels are? Can you all raise your hand? Can I see my K1s? K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. Oh, okay, good. Nice, pretty even split. And I like you're all spread out now, and that's really great. But this afternoon, I'm going to put you in grade level tables. So just know that you'll move. I'm telling you ahead of time. As an elementary teacher, you know what we go through. We have, 6 to 8 subjects a day we teach, right? And so you kind of find in elementary schools, or you know that you have a passion for one particular area. So you're probably with me in that your passion is in the social studies. Otherwise, you wouldn't be up on a summer morning in this beautiful facility. But still, it's summer. You're here because you have a passion. But sometimes that's a difficult spot to be in, isn't it? An elementary teacher with a passion for social studies and civics. And the reason that's a difficult place to be in is because we all know, as much as we might be passionate about this subject, as much as we know the importance of this subject, that it's so often that marginalized content area, right? It's the one that, you watch your colleagues, oh, I've got 10 minutes before the end of the day, let's take out our social studies books. Yeah, or let's use the Scholastic News as our social studies. Or I will do a read aloud on Martin Luther King Jr. and call that social studies for the month, right? So we know that sometimes it doesn't get the attention it deserves, but truly, it's social studies. It's social studies where we see the big picture. And that's the core of our work. The core of our work as teachers is found in the social studies. So we call this inquiry, engagement, involvement, and action. And it's this idea that this action piece, right? I mean, we give our kids these great standards and this great education, but this is the idea of what students do with their education. So we teach them all these things. Now what? That's really the gist of this, right? The gist of this workshop, the gist of our own career, the reason we go to work every day. All right, let me see if I can get this. Hey, I did it. So I really want you to just take a minute before we begin this day to think about the big picture. Really, we sometimes get lost in test scores, staff meetings, IEPs, SSTs, whatever you're doing on your emails. We get caught up in all the minutia of our elementary teacher day, that we don't often get the time to sit back and think about the big picture. This is particularly important that we constantly go back to this. Best practices, skills, standards, none of that matters if you don't know your why. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of education? Why are we in this profession? It's not the awesome pay. It's not the glamorous working conditions. What would you say? Just shout it out. If someone said, why are you in this profession? Go back to your, college days. Why did you choose it? What is your reasons? What are your reasons? Someone shout it out. Betterment of society. What else? Love of learning for yourself and to pass that on to others. Make a difference. That's the one. 9 times out of 10, I can ask a group of pre-service teachers, I can ask veteran teachers, that's what they say. I'm in teaching because I want to make a difference. What is it that you hope to teach beyond your standards? We all have our standards. What do you hope to teach beyond your standards? Shout it out. Be kind. Kindness. Exactly. Help them to believe in themselves. What else? Persevere. So all these things are not measurable, are they? Necessarily, in our standard way that we measure. I want you to take a second to think about the teachers you remember from your child, from elementary school. I saw a T-shirt online that said, "Be a teacher. No one ever asks you who your favorite governor was." So true. But if you think about your favorite teacher, I know you remember their names, right? We can all rattle off our names. But think about the teacher that impacted you. Chances are that teacher hit your emotional core somehow, right? Chances are that teacher taught you something larger than standards. Chances are that teacher taught you to believe in yourself, to persevere, to solve problems. Someone who taught you to have a voice and that your voice was valued. Someone who taught you that you have power and that you matter and that you can make a difference and you can make positive change. I have kids visit me all the time. They're 30 with kids in their hand and facial hair. And they'll be like, "Hi, Mrs. Valbuena, do you remember me?" And I'm rattling through the thousands of faces, right? And I say, "Yes, honey," right? Because I can't. And of course I remember you. And once they get over the fact that they tell me that I shrunk, I'm like, "No, you grew. I've always been this size." I always ask them the same question. What do you remember about 5th grade? I taught 3rd, 5th, and 1 year of kindergarten. Don't ask. Just kidding. Kindergarten teachers. I'll say, "What do you remember about 5th grade?" And they'll say, almost always, they say something like, "When we danced in the multicultural fair. When we helped those 1st graders learn to read. I remember my reading buddy. I remember going to that old person's home and singing patriotic songs." You know what? They never remember that kick-ass math lesson I taught with manipulatives. They don't remember that great primary source I dug out for my Jamestown unit. We do that because we're teachers, but what kids remember is everything beyond standards. What you remember from your elementary years are probably not your individual lessons, right? It's how you felt in that classroom, what you learned about yourself as a person. So if we really want to make a difference, we need to teach kids to be thinkers. They need to leave us with an understanding of how to solve problems, engage in civil discourse, right? Collaborate, research, be involved, and most importantly, to be engaged. And we measure our students' success. When we measure it, we need to ask ourselves a question. Which do we want them to fill in? As we shift away from these high-stakes tests, these multiple-choice tests, to a more thinking, meaning-centered curriculum, we want to value authentic learning, preparation for college, career, and civic life. Regardless of college and career, we prepare our students for civic life. We need to create an engaged citizenry. And most important is the elementary years. And we were laughing outside in the hall, like, when do kids get civics? In California, they get it typically 2nd semester of senior year. That's a captive audience. We need to be doing this from the time they are 5 years old because habits of mind are developed in our world. That's when habits are developed. That's when we're going to develop these engaged citizens, is when they're little. And they carry those skills through their schooling into college, into adulthood. So when kids are making meaning, think about it. When they're actually making meaning throughout your teaching, there's rigor and there's relevance. It's those two things, rigor and relevance, that makes school fun. That's what makes learning fun. Just enough rigor and all kinds of relevance, right? When something's too easy, it's boring. I already knew it. There's no growth going on. So we need we need rigor in our teaching, but most importantly, we need that relevance. So tying learning to the real world, that's really what gets kids excited. That's what gets kids wanting to come back to school. I don't want to be absent because I can't miss what's going to happen in Mrs. Valbuena's class. We want that type of excitement, that type of pull, and that comes from making our teaching relevant and real world. And that's what makes it educational. So our one job, and this really is our big picture, teachers. Think about this. When you're getting up in the morning, you're ready to go to work, you're tired, but you grab your bag of hope and you get in the car because that's what we do. You know, you have one job at the end of the day, and that's to make your kids love learning. That's it. If you can do that, you're successful. Yes, I know standards, they're important, but they need to come to school every day and love learning. They need to love school and love learning so that they keep on doing it. So herein lies one little issue, right? This, right? Our lives. Isn't it true? So we don't want, I know when I present often about civics and people are like, oh, one more thing, just don't give me another binder, right? We get binders all the time. We don't want to see civics inclusion as one more thing to do. I know how busy teachers are. I'm one. You're exhausted. You work these long days. There's so many changes in education right now. There's so many demands in our profession. It's very stressful. But remember, it's not about the graded papers, reports, and emails. This is about humanity. It's huge what we do. It's about humanity. We have these multifaceted little human beings sitting in front of us each day, and we get that front row seat to learning, right? What the greatest job ever. So besides all this, we get that honor of being in the front row while that child gets that spark, and we get to be a witness to see them in the act of learning. That's what makes all of this worthwhile. So if we put civics at the center, we're impacting the lives of our students, we're impacting the lives of people, our country, and the world. So it really isn't one more thing to put on our plate, and I hope that we never feel that way. Civics is not one more thing to put on the plate. It is the plate. It's the reason we're doing all the other things. Reading, math, science, STEM, STEAM, VAPA, visual and performing arts. All of it is on the plate of civics. It isn't one more thing. It just is the plate. We must put this at the center. And I know Martha has used this quote, and I love it, so I always use it too. But it's from Ken Burns several years ago at the National Council of Social Studies. But he says, he emphasizes this critical need for social studies at the conference. And it was in response to this giant attention given to STEM and NGSS, right, in the last years. And that's important. He says, civics is actually how things work, how things stick together. No amount of STEAM and no amount of STEM and no amount of STEAM will work unless you have given the operator's manual. In a democracy, it's called civics, and we need to bring it back. And then the audience went, because it was like 200 educators from around and I was having one of those moments, you know, when you feel the energy in your soul. And I snapped the picture and have used that quote ever since because it was such a powerful moment for teaching, for educators in general, but especially to be in that room with people that are like-minded, that know the importance of civics education. And not only should you know it and feel it, but be a leader back at your campus. Be a model and be a leader of it so we can spread the importance of it. Reading and math, they're important. Reading, math, science, of course they're important, but they're only valuable when the person doing them is a good citizen. They're only valuable if the person doing them knows their place in society and understands humanity and empathizes and has all of the characteristics of a civic-minded human. That idea of common good comes out of civics and social studies. Such a needed component, especially in today's environment. I think we've hit a place where people are sitting up straight going, oh, we need to do something. We've known that all along. But that's why I feel like it's super important to put in that push for you, if you have a passion for this, to be a leader at your site. So I just would like to do a quick review of the C3 framework. Is everybody familiar with it? The C3 framework? It's the College, Career, and Civic Life framework. It's a national document. And this is right out of the introduction of it. Most of the state frameworks, California, we just adopted ours in 2016. I know you're still working on yours. I looked on your website. But I know that most states are using the C3 framework, and yours is as well, as their basis of knowledge. The C3 framework gives the foundations of social studies here. And I think it's super important that we keep these things in mind as we go through today and go through our planning for our next school year and the rest of our teaching lives. But the foundations of social studies are preparing kids for that college, career, and civic life. Those are those 3 C's. Inquiry is the foundation. Now, this is a beautiful thing. This takes social studies and turns it into inquiry model. We're very used to that with Common Core because we start with a question in language arts and math, and we go to solve that question. Science is very familiar with inquiry-based. So turning social science into a science, not just reading about people of the past, but asking a question and digging and researching and looking at primary sources and getting kids to make a claim with evidence after they've looked at pieces of history, to not just read about it and reiterate, but to turn it into an inquiry. Fits right along with all the other content areas. So most teachers this is not new or a surprise. It might be new in social studies, but inquiry-based instruction is definitely not new. It's nice to put social studies in that area as well. The foundation of social studies, number 3, is to include the core disciplines. Our C3 framework includes the 4 big ones that were highly debated, by the way, but they include civics, economics, geography, and history as our main 4. But the document has in its appendix psychology, sociology, anthropology, and a couple of others. Because when we get professors on board, everyone thinks that theirs is the most important, right? It was a really debated topic. But those 4 things interwoven throughout your curriculum is the idea of our core disciplines in the social studies. We're looking for a deep and enduring understanding. In other words, we don't want to do a surface learning of social studies and history of this, mile wide and inch deep. A lot of states have these giant amount of standards, right? So you're kind of doing this quick. No one remembers that. Right, so the idea is to go a mile deep and an inch wide. Learn something deeply and transfer that information. For example, if you study the American Revolution, you can study all kinds of revolutions happening today. So understanding concept of revolution instead of just isolated pieces of history, but going thematic and going deep within a concept. So you may not cover as much content, but you're going to cover it deeply. And it's the skills we're after. Researching, thinking, evaluating resources, corroborating resources, writing an argument. Those are the skills that our kids need. They can get information whenever they need it. What do you do with that information? That's what we're focusing in the C3 framework. Getting them ready for democratic decision-making, so lots of collaborative conversations and civil discourse, and taking, a stance, backing it with evidence, orally and in writing. And then obviously 6 is that inclusion of ELA, math, social studies. We really want to integrate and include literacy instruction along the way. What a better marriage than with the social studies, where we do all the writing, speaking, listening. You have to read something, right? It might as well be a primary source. You have to read informational text. You have to do writing. So let it be in the social studies. That's where we can find the time in our very busy day, is through integration. Time to bring social studies out of the margin. So today our big topic is, well, how do we do this? How can we get our kids civically engaged? How do I get a 5-year-old civically minded? How about a 3rd grader? What is it that they can do? What should we expect from them? And how can we set this up in our classroom? So how do I incorporate civic education in an already packed curriculum? If we're really going to consider educating the heart, which is really what we're doing, then it's not a 30-minute standalone lesson. We need to stop that type of thinking. We're not doing civics. It's not civics time. It might be, but more often, it's going to be integrated throughout the way you live your day, throughout the way your day is structured. Are you voting often? Do you have discussions in every content area? In the social study. So we embed our civics within our day. It's sort of picture your classroom. It's this arch over your classroom. It's the umbrella. It's maybe not necessarily a 20, 30-minute lesson in a separate box in your plan book. It could be, but usually isn't. So civics education is like our umbrella, our overarch over the classroom. It's integrated and woven throughout the day in every content area. We know that you can integrate it with your academic skills, your content standards, and most importantly, that time for structured reflection. I see a lot of teachers forget that part. Whatever kids are doing that you feel is a civics type of learning, they won't learn it through osmosis. You have to do some sort of guided reflection with them and point out, when you did these things, here's what we were doing. Like, we want kids to do that's where research tells us the learning happens, is in that reflective stage. And that's true for teachers too, right? We learn about our best teaching when we reflect on our day of teaching. So why civic-based action? I know you already are sold, but let me just remind you what research says. We know that kids learn when the learning is authentic. I don't want to say kids, humans. All of us learn best when learning is authentic and relevant. We know that service learning, project-based action types of assignments build self-esteem in an authentic way. We all know we feel best when we help others. It's just human nature. There's something magical about that. Your self-esteem is lifted when you lift others up. So exposing children to that at an early age is what we're after. Social responsibility from a young age, that habit of mine, and also the academic learning. You will hit your standards. Don't be afraid that, I don't have time. You do, absolutely. There is time because your academic learning is embedded. So today, I would like to share just some of Glendora. Glendora is a small suburb, 20 minutes outside of Pasadena or so. I won't say minutes, 20 miles. It could be 2 hours outside of Pasadena, depending on what time of day and what freeway you're on. But, and I share my information with you, and at the end, so if you're ever in the LA area, I would hope that you would contact me. Even if you're on a vacation, I can slide you into a quick observation to a classroom, because there's nothing cooler than seeing another classroom in another state, especially, and watching teachers in action. It's just a blast. And I have access to a lot of classrooms, so please give me a holler when you're in town. And I'll either, if it's summertime, I'll show you around, or I'd love to just show you a school, just school setting even. So you'll be surprised, and it's fun. So I wanted to share just some of Glendora's students, just quick examples. And the reason I'm sharing examples is because knowing examples can help serve as idea seeds for you. And the reason that they have to be idea seeds is that because we're dealing with little human beings, you really can't take a project and go, here's mine, you do it. Because it's so student-focused, your students are different from last year's students. They're different from my students. So my project, my is not going to unroll the same way as it will in your room. But by seeing ideas, you can grab seeds and then get ideas to do it in your own room, in your own way. But it's very difficult. There's so many sources online, which I'll share with you too, but it's really difficult to take one and just do it. It's just not as organic that way. right? So, and that's a good place to start. But I share a few with you so that each project is different, and ideally it comes from the kids. And I'm going to share with you this afternoon in our workshop how you do that, because we facilitate that, right? The idea is theirs, but we facilitate it, especially when you're 5, right? That stuff needs facilitating. So there are tricks to our teacher trade here that we work on. But I wanted to share a couple of examples with you, and if you like the idea, just jot down the idea, and then maybe it will lead to something that could work in your specific classroom. This is the first one. This is when I taught 3rd grade, and you can see the man in fatigues in the front. So let me just give you a quick background information. My why of doing this, like I always have an idea of what I want to do before the kids do it. I let it be their idea, but I have an idea of what this is going to be. And the reason I wanted to work on this particular project, and I had a class of 3rd grade boys it was boy heavy, but everything was a gun. They rolled up their paper. They had glorified weaponry. They had glorified war. They had glorified everything about it. And it was very disturbing to me. And just me saying, don't do that, isn't effective, right? So they were using their pencil. They were, you know how kids do that? And they pick up anything on there. And like, especially now, no, not acceptable behavior. I wanted kids to understand that that isn't what military life is, necessarily, or ever. And at the same time, our community is right in the San Gabriel foothills. All the foothill communities, they're small. For California, they're small. I say that because out here, it's not small for you. I drove your street this morning. There's no line in the middle of it. I'm just kidding. I was like, oh, no line. Our cities are small, but all of a sudden these yellow flags were going up on all the light posts with names of service men and women. They had their own picture. Every city did it different, but Glendora had these banners going up. Kids were getting curious because the landscape was changing, right? And so they had questions about this. And in 3rd grade, our standards are local history, so we're really looking at our community and our city. So I decided to ask a guest speaker to come in. Didn't talk about the project at all, just asked this guest speaker to come in. So he is a military person in our city and actually went to this elementary school that I work at. And I just let the kids ask him questions. What they got out of the 30-minute presentation was, hey, there are people in our community away from home that really could use our help. They're away from home. What could we do for them? They're homesick. So in a 3rd grade way, I had an idea of what I was going to do because I wrote a grant for it. To be honest, I already had an idea. But the thought was I wanted them to learn about these people, as many as they could. We were going to print a book and put the book around the community about people from Glendora who are overseas, and then eventually send packages to these people so that we could help them. So the first step is I acquired the names from this yellow ribbon committee, and we got 600 names. That's how many people in our community are in the service. So I sent out letters, an email to these people, and we got 30 responses. No, about 60 responses. So in the letter, I asked if they could be interviewed by my 3rd graders. Would they mind coming into Stanton Elementary School and be interviewed by our 3rd graders? So of those 600 letters, so we got about 60 returns, and we set up a little office in one of our empty classrooms and let our 3rd graders interview parents and relatives of people overseas. So I have to tell you, we put up this little backdrop, and the kids wrote their own questions. And we had a form that we had put up ahead of time. And you can see the picture of the service. They brought in a picture. And I was watching this. And mind you, I have to get someone to cover my class. And I'm running back and forth. And I'm watching this. And I'm dying because I feel bad. It's 10 o'clock on a weekday. These parents are sitting in a classroom in an elementary school. Well, my kids are saying, what's your son's favorite food? And they'll say, Cheetos. And then my kids are like, And I'm back there, hurry up, hurry up. My poor kids are phonetically like Cheetos. And I'm dying thinking, oh my gosh, please hurry, because these parents have given up part of their day. They're sitting in my classroom. Could you please hurry? And I turn and I look at the parent, and there's a tear. I stopped, stepped back, and I went, this is okay. Someone is asking about their child, and they're really touched by this. I'm just going to let this happen. So my students slowly and very third grade-like wrote the answer to every question that they had asked the parents. They took the answers to those questions, and then they created a paragraph, which is a third grade writing standard, an informational paragraph. We took those paragraphs, turned them into a book. I had 100 copies of this book made, hardbound, and we put them in coffee shops and dental offices around the city. That would be what we call our action. We wanted other people to know the story of these humans. And then they also sent boxes. So in the back of the room, they put up, that's why they want to know their favorite food, because they put Cheetos in the box, right? So this is another picture of a grandpa and one of the interviewees. And this was a very successful project. We wrote the pages, we published the books, we got visitors, we've got a flag returned to us, folded in a triangle that said, this flag was flown at the top of a Black Hawk helicopter for Stanton Elementary School. We had visitors come back in uniform. It happened all year long. And we did this at the beginning of the year, but it kept coming back, and the kids will for sure remember it. The way we celebrated is we put together, I let them walk in the community parade. We have a holiday parade every year at Christmas time, and we invited all of our people to march with us. So there's a sign that says Civic Connections, and my colleague and I are holding the sign. And in the back are my students with their yellow banner with their name of the person that they wrote about. Sometimes the parents were with us. I think you can see there's a woman holding her 8x10 of her child, of her daughter who's in the service. Sometimes we had people in the service. But that was a very meaningful way to celebrate and culminate the activity. And just a really wonderful connection that started small but got big, and something surely memorable to students so that they can think about. We didn't go political on it. It wasn't about war. It wasn't about, is it right that we're in Iraq? It was just, these are people in our community that are away from home. They need our help. They could benefit from things that we can give to them. How can we help the people in our community that we care about? Other human beings. We didn't take a political stance at all. In Glendora is a suburb of LA, and I use that term lightly because suburb doesn't mean there's anything green in between LA and Glendora. So our kids have not really seen agriculture, even though California is an agricultural state. Unless they see a lemon truck on the 210 freeway, they really have no idea that farming exists anywhere in the state. Most of them don't leave Southern California. So we address this topic of hunger. Our kids, I ask the kids, what do you worry about? What do you think is wrong in our community? Well, no one should be hungry because we seem to have plenty of food. And that was a really big problem. They saw that as a problem, so I went with it. We have this, I did a little research, and you may have something like this. You may have it very close by or something different. But in Irvine, in Orange County, we have a place called the Incredible Edible Garden that allows people to come in and they call it glean the field. And you go in after a field's been mechanically picked with your hands and a little serrated knife, and you pick what's left, and it goes to the food shelter. So I finagled the buses, and we took kids down there to do this. And not only was it, we were studying agriculture, which is our history social studies standards, but we got into Cesar Chavez, which is part of our history social science standards. We got into geography. We got into economics. We hit so many standards. We culminated by taking the kids down to the garden where they picked, in this case, this is an SDC class. They're actually planting. My class picked broccoli, and most of them had never seen broccoli on an actual plant. And they thought they were super cool with their serrated knife. And I heard things like this. So this is what Cesar Chavez felt like. And then I heard, "Did you taste it? It's really sweet." They'd never had broccoli right off the vine, right off the plant is sweet. They've never tasted it. Then I heard this, "Look at this caterpillar." Never saw a caterpillar. So I'm just saying that these are things that are not in my standards, that were not my intent, but happened, right? So we picked, this is Carlisle. I love this. He brought his own gloves from home, his kitchen gloves. Is that the cutest? He thought he might need them. And at the end of the day, I had 20 kids and 10 parents pick 500 pounds of broccoli. The man from the Incredible Edible Garden stood up in front of he's back there in the back. He's huge. It was this big guy. He came up and my little kids were like, he said, "Thank you so much. I appreciate this. This broccoli is going to the shelter tonight. You have just fed 80 families." My kids were they got on that bus like they conquered the world. They knew they were important. They knew they made a difference. We had them do a quick write at the end. This is our special day student. She said, "Our field trip's fun. We went gleaning and planting. We planted for people who do not have enough money to buy food. I'm glad that people got food because we planted tomatoes." Just quick sentences, but we let them think about it. And I'm sure you've seen these I am poems before. But at the end of it, I wanted to see what kids learn. And sometimes these are the best types of assessments. And this is by a student named Rachel. And it's called I Am a Farm Worker. We had studied agriculture. This was a culmination of that. And this is the poem that she wrote. And I want to preface, before I read this poem, I want you to know that Rachel is an immigrant. Her parents are British. Her mom is a nanny. Her dad is a Volvo repairman. They landed in California with no knowledge of California history, no connection to the farm worker movement. And this is this child writing, an 8-year-old writing this poem at the end of the unit. It says, "I am a farm worker. I'm a person who is treated unfairly. I wonder what farm is next. I hear the poisonous pesticides planes roaring overhead. I see others laboring to feed America. I want peace for everyone I know and love. I'm sick and weary like everyone else. I pretend that there is no violence in this world. I feel Cesar Chavez watching over me from the heavens. I touch the pesticides that killed many farm workers. I worry about the future of the farm workers. I cry when justice is not served. I am respectful to Cesar Chavez. I understand that all your wishes can't come true. I say, si se puede. I dream for things to change." That's an incredible amount of empathy from an 8-year-old with no prior background, with no previous understanding or no personal connection. It was our studies, our unit, our involvement, our action that helped her develop those things. That is the power of civic action. One year, I was low on budget, of course, we always are, and down the street is our state-run preschool. It's called Head Start. So our low socioeconomic students go for preschool. My students had just gotten a pencil. This all started with a pencil. I gave them a pencil that said, "Readers are leaders." And they liked that. So we wrote it on the board and we capitalized on "Readers are leaders." And then their question was, what came up in conversation is, how do we make sure that people will enjoy reading and keep reading? How do we make sure that people in society like reading? Because if you don't like reading, you don't do it. And if you don't do it, you don't get better, which is something I always tell them. Like, if you have to read if you want to get better. It's just like any sport, got to practice. They decided this was their idea. They're like, well, let's help the preschool if we can. Can we walk there? Yes, I think we can. So we opened a program called PAL, Partners Accelerating Literacy. And we each got a PAL, a 3-year-old PAL. And every month we wrote a book, a simple book. Like this one was out February. It was like a red heart, a blue heart. It's really easy for kids to make that. The best part was my low students, my non-readers, my English learners in class, in my third grade class, who are typically, struggling every single day, to write that heart book was a piece of cake, right? A blue heart, a yellow heart, and then to go read it and be the person that knows, the person in power, not in power, but you know what I mean, the person that has the knowledge. It was amazing what this project did for my low readers. Having the ability to read to a 3-year-old who looks up to you. It was the most amazing, easy action project that I've done. Here's some reflection from it. When I met my child, she got up really slowly as if she was scared of me. I took her to a table and read a heart book to her. She repeated the words after I read the book. I asked her a few questions like, what's your name and what's your favorite color? Her name happened to be Sasha, and her favorite colors are pink, red, and blue. When it was playtime, we played with letter puppets and Legos. Sasha found some really cool dinosaurs. Sasha took out the puppets and pretended to eat the dinosaurs' heads. I thought that was really funny. My experience at Head Start was so cool. They develop their reading skills really fast. I hope to see them again when they can read a book to me. That would be so cool. And that's an 8-year-old. And just quick reflection, right? And this one, when I went to Head Start, my buddy was named Daniel. He didn't talk that much. He knows his colors, but he got stuck on black. He likes the book 2 Eggs, Please. He really likes the book, and he likes lots of books. His favorite part of the classroom was the kitchen. He didn't read, but he thought it was cool when I opened the book. And he jumped up and said, do I get to keep it? I also said, I'm going to read it to my mom. It was really fun working with my pal. My school down the street, now that I'm a TOSA, I work in all 5 schools. My 4th grade teacher has this quote this was her question for the entire school year: can words inspire change? And the coolest thing transpired in her classroom. Her kids got into quotes too. Isn't that funny? Kids are like little mirrors. When we're excited about something, guess what? They're excited about something. So I'm telling you, if you go in with passion, you're going to get 20, 30 little kids that have that same passion that you have. So what they did is they chose words to put on our schools are all outside, right? There's no hallway. The door opens outside. So you can see above, they put their words. Those words were voted on by the entire student body. And then the kids were asked, find a quote that fits that. And it was sort of like a contest. They would find quotes and bring it to their teacher, and she would pick a quote. If their quote got picked, it was hung with their name next to it. So their quote was, and it decorated the entire school and was just a wonderful way to build community and to engage students, and all student-run, student-centered. So this is the 4th graders that made their chart. They were voting on the words, and this happened at recess, just with a tally, quick and easy. That's a close-up of it. And once they found the words, they do this all year. They keep adding words to the beams, and they keep adding quotes. And there's 5 hallways, so they have 1 hallway done, 4 more to go. So it's going to take many years. In one of my 5th grade classrooms, they simply they had gone to the LA County Fair, which we all go in September. It's mandatory. We love it, though. Just kidding. So at one of the fair tables was the Heifer International. Have you heard of this organization? So my students picked up all the buttons and pamphlets because they pick up anything free. And they brought it home and they thought, oh, well, what is this? Can we do this? Can we buy a cow for a family in the Philippines? That'd be super cool. So one type of project is to raise money. Like, it's not as involved as some of the others, but since it came from them, I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? They sold bookmarks, they made things to sell. And then we raised money for a cow for a family in the Philippines. That was their idea. And this was the reflection. It made me feel good because we raised money for a cause, not for ourselves. I learned that when we're helping people in need, that is your reward. I wanted to end this section with a primary source, and this is from a book called Teacher and Child. It's a letter to teachers. Dear teacher, I'm a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no man should witness. Gas chambers built by learned engineers, infants killed by trained nurses, women and babies shot and burned by high school and college graduates. So, I am suspicious of education. My request is, help your students to become human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, educated Eichmanns. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are only important if they serve to make our children more human. What good is reading, writing, math, science if you don't know how to be a good citizen, if you don't know your place in society? And what we do is more than teach standards. We, elementary teachers, are so powerful. Our role in society is the most important because public education does not actually serve a public. It creates a public. So our goal is also our motivation. We want kids to appreciate our country. We want them to know how it works. We want them to participate by being active, engaged citizens, global citizens. And teachers, you are amazing and the most important. I hope you like your title, because Badass Life Changer is not really a job title. I hope you have a nice little break and we'll get together. I told you I'd give you my contact information. This was at a conference in California. I love it, Civics, Captain Civics, and it says, meanwhile, back in the classroom, because that's where all the magic really happens. There's my information if you ever want to contact me again, and I will see you after your break.